Yes.
All right,
Luke Murray,
Here,
Alita Hall,
Here.
Amy Anzalone,
Here.
Don Cowart,
Present.
Dr. Dixon,
Here.
Dave D'Agostino,
I am here.
Christine Kennedy,
Here.
Kimberly Shockley,
Here.
Rob Levick,
Here.
Joe Lucian,
Here.
Jason Martin,
Here.
Catherine Patno,
Here.
John Price,
Here.
and Wesley Lee Restall.
Here. Amy, where's the Christmas tree?
Harold Sands.
Just trying to get dinner on. I promise I'm gonna sit still in a minute.
I think Harold's next door, I think I'll,
called the holiday tree, Lee. Holiday tree. All right, so we're, I think we're only missing Harold, is that correct?
I'll text him. I think he's next door, but
Oh, okay, no problem. Let me just make sure he didn't come in under, oh, yeah, he came in under attendee.
okay.
Perfect. And then- Hey, Harold. All right. Well, it looks like we have a full house tonight, so thank you for attending. I appreciate it. It's good to see everybody. It's been a little bit. I understand that. So we'll try to get through. I do have approval of meeting minutes on the schedule, on the agenda as a running item. I don't think we have any, right, Craig, at this point?
I didn't, I'll send them tomorrow so we can put them on next agenda.
Okay, so we'll bump that to next agenda. I'll move on to the chairman's report. So I know it's been a little while since we've seen each other. As I had mentioned in my email that I put out to everybody, that is intentional. I wanted to give you all a break. It's been, it was a pretty fast and hectic last couple months of the stage 2, where we're meeting every couple weeks. And I know that you all have other obligations, especially the members of council who have been very, very active. You know, as they ramped up their tenure, they've been finding a new town manager and dealing with budget and other things. School committee members, myself included as well. So while some of the things that were going on in the background with RIDE, I thought it was a good time to hit the pause button, kind of let everyone take a breather while some of the stuff baked up in the background, meaning that RIDE had some additional updates they wanted. They had put out to Phil. Phil got back to them, Phil and Rick, sorry, Rick, you do a lot of work here too, and the team over at Studio Jade got back to RIDE. One of the biggest things that we dealt with was the swing space plan. We gathered together Joe Lucian and the team over at the middle school. We had a Friday afternoon meeting and kind of worked out what we were going to do after having already spoken to Don Cowart and his team about the fact that the elementary schools didn't look like they were a good fit. So instead of going down that road, we decided to go ahead to the middle school and look at what we had for space at that school to see if we could accommodate it. Working with the team, it seemed to work. Turns out the team made it work. So just so everybody knows, there was a small change to the design, which would include a small classroom space. And Rick, do you want to go over that quick, just so you can?
Sure.
Heads up?
So we added 4 classrooms adjacent to the gymnasium. We also included some minor alterations to the auditorium to create some swing space there. So I think working with everybody, we came up with enough classrooms with this addition, this 4 classroom addition, to basically keep all of the students at the middle school, which was obviously a huge benefit. And then that space is basically could be turned into whatever we like in the end, but more community spaces, given where it is right off of the cafeteria-ish area and the gymnasium area. So I think it was a good, a pretty good ad for the value that we're getting. Yes.
For those that remember, maybe when we did the walkthrough, we had talked about adding a community space close to the gymnasium for flex space because CYO basketball uses it, other people use the gym. Now with the cafeteria moving back to where, well, respectively moving back to where it was originally, that aligns with the gymnasium. It seems to coordinate a lot better. And we'd have some additional space, which would initially be classrooms if we need it, but we could make it into a flex space community room. So, and it's also solved the swing space need. So obviously we had to cost shift some of the money from the elementary schools just on the swing space to the middle school to accommodate that, but it seemed like a great solution. And I do want to point out, Mrs. A, thank you for your input early on in this, that the elementary schools were probably not going to be the best option on it. And so we were able to pivot pretty quickly and respond to that. And I think we came up with a pretty good plan, which was approved by RIDE. Does anybody have any questions on that one item? Because that kind of happened fast. We had to respond to RIDE's comments and the whole group was not involved in that decision, although it was something we had talked about previously. So I felt comfortable traveling down that lane with Phil's guidance and Rick's guidance. No questions, comments, concerns, gripes, none of the above. All right, I'll move on. So we have been having leadership meetings, as I expressed before. We've been meeting with myself. Ms. Patno has been on there as the school committee chair and building committee member. Council President Dixon, Vice President Jen Ludwig, the new town manager Ben Marchant, Lisa Mills, the town finance director, Harold Sands, who's now come on as the school finance director, a lot of new faces. And we've met to discuss the impact of a bond if we were to go forward. And the idea being, and I expressed this before to you, we wanted to kind of vet a due diligence process in the background where we looked at the bond from various different angles, because we know that once we present this to the public, they're going to have questions. And we want to be very clear on the answers, and they want a decision tree to come up that they understand that we've vetted this through a process. So one of the things that we've looked at is the potential impact on the bond rating of the town, should we float a bond. We came out of that process, and I will tell you that the effect is low overall. I can share that information with you in more specific detail. I don't want to go too far into it tonight, but I will say that in general, I believe it's only 5% of your rating is bonded debt or debt in general. And so it had a relatively minor impact, although it does have an impact, and that impact could cause interest rates on other bonds or borrowing to go up. Then we have to look at the capacity of the town to borrow, and also whether we even have the political will or the feasibility from a budgetary standpoint, the dynamics to be able to borrow that money or put it to the voters, the way you think it's digestible. Ultimately, this is not our decision. It's going to be a decision of the town council at this point. We voted unanimously. You came up with a vision. You've done your job. We vetted the stage 1 and stage 2 process. You've done your job. Now we're at a point in the crossroads where we've got the right approval we were looking for. Now the town and the school committee hopefully can come to some semblance of agreement on whether this can move forward, but ultimately it's a town council decision. So what I've been trying to do in the background, and I know this hasn't involved everybody, and I apologize, in my email I mentioned this, if anybody's felt in the dark in the process, it's not because they want to. I try to give you what updates I can, but some of this gets a little complicated because we're dealing with numbers and strategies and figuring out, okay, can we even get this move forward, right? From a no-brainer standpoint, I would say if somebody's giving me 63 cents on a dollar, that's a pretty good deal on something I need. So if somebody was willing to pay 63 cents per dollar on my mortgage, I'd certainly take it. But we also have to be respectful of the people in this town who have to pay the other, 42, 43% of this. So we'll go over the ride agreement or what they've presented to us as far as their ratio, but it was pretty generous. So does anybody have any general questions or, I guess I'll put it out there. In my email, I've mentioned that, there was some indication to me that there may be people feeling like they were been sort of not feeling part of the process. And I want you to feel free to speak up to me. You can do it tonight. You can certainly talk to me offline. But that is not my intent. This is not a, Luke Murray show here. This is a building committee who's worked many, many months on a collaborative process. So if you felt that way, I hope that we can correct that moving forward. And with that, I'll open it up to anybody who would like to speak. And any questions whatsoever on what I've just spoken on.
Luke,
Yes, Kim?
are there going to be, and possibly President Dixon is a better person to ask this to, but I know she's just come out of another meeting, so I don't want to throw a question at her. But are we going to get the opportunity to speak as a council before a vote would have to happen with Mr. Marchant, with Ms. Mills, Mr. Sands? This board is probably the most impressive board I've seen in this town. The skill set that got together to make this plan is very impressive. I 100% agree that the amount of money we're going to be reimbursed for a project that's going to need to be done, now is the time. My goal would be to put it in front of the voters. And the only way I would feel I couldn't do that is if I didn't have the backing of most, especially Mr. Sands and Ms. Mills saying, yes, there's a way of doing this, that the town would be able to afford it. Because if that's the case, if there are options and ways of doing it, I would want, and I'm not speaking for the council, I would want to put it in front of the voters. But if our financial people are saying, this just isn't plausible, then I would be more concerned about giving that sort of option to the voters where they have no way of making a good decision. So, because there is no good decision. So do you know like how we're gonna get that level of security?
So I can speak to, and Council President Dixon can certainly speak to, because you're both council members on the council process, how you would like to approach it, right? I don't control that. What my intent was, and what I've been trying to do over the many months, which has made a little bit more difficult, and this is nobody's fault, a little more difficult by the fact that we have 2 new finance directors and a brand new town manager, right? And I'm trying to get people up to speed as quick as I can. And maybe I didn't realize to some extent, that I needed to do that quicker, right? Times are running out. And to be quite honest, if we get to the end of June, the legislative session's out, we need to get enabling legislation. So my goal at this point is to get everybody up to the point where we're having a meeting tomorrow morning with the town manager. I've extended the hand. We sent over the stage 1, stage 2 package, both digitally and hard copy. I believe the stage 2 was dropped off today. To go through ad nauseum, if necessary, the process to date and explain how our decision tree went to this point. And then my next intention was to start continue to talking on the due diligence to get to the financials, get the leadership meeting together and try to vet out a strategy of can we get to a place where we can explain the finances? Does this work? And can we get some level of comfort? Can we get support from the town side? I can't answer those questions right now because we haven't gotten there yet.
Sure. Okay.
But my hope would be that would be rather quickly at this point to give the council members and I'm more than willing to attend anything or get the building committee together for any meeting that the council wants to have, either in part or in whole, because I think it's extremely important that we present to the town as a unit. So if that means that this building committee in whole needs to meet with the council in whole with the finance directors, everybody, then I'm willing to do that, whatever helps move this process forward. So with that, Ann, you have your hand up.
I do. I just want to mention that this morning, I met with Mr. Marchand and Ms. Mills to lay out a recommended plan by which the presentation would be made to the town council, and of course, the public would be attending that meeting, and that will be discussed with you tomorrow morning. So I have anticipated that we need to come up with a process and a plan by which the council really gets a full presentation, and so can easily, not easily, but make a decision. So I laid out that plan, and I believe it will be shared with you tomorrow morning, and then we can go forward based on that discussion you're going to have tomorrow morning, and I believe it's at 8 o'clock. So I have been anticipating that we need to get moving and that we need to have a time set aside for a presentation. So I want to reassure you that I have been thinking about it, and I started the wheels moving this morning.
Appreciate that, Ann. And just so everybody knows, Alita will be in on that meeting. Phil will be in on that meeting. I will be in on that meeting. Obviously, we can't include everybody on that meeting. I wish I could. But I think what I will do is send an update tomorrow, just on the general, what we're looking at. And just so everybody knows, I do plan on having a pretty aggressive meeting schedule this month, knowing that this would come up, that to keep people in the loop very closely on a week-to-week basis. So if we need to, we'll be having them every week. I don't want to jump the gun, but that's what I'm thinking at this point. Rob, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Can you explain what brought us to the 63%? How we got the extra bump? I kind of think it's important if any citizens are listening too.
Yeah, actually, I'll go over that as our next agenda item, Rob.
All
so
right.
you can hang tight.
Sure.
That's on our agenda on the RIDE SBA approval. So absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? I think it was a great question, Kim. Christine.
Yeah, so just kind of going back to your original question, I wasn't feeling left out, but I really liked seeing the email that you sent with the update. Like when I found myself leading up to that 62.8% like subject line, wondering like what was going on. So when I saw that in my email, I kind of got excited, like, oh, okay, like something's happening. So maybe just a few like update emails along the way. Like I know there's a lot going on in the background and I don't necessarily need to be a part of that, but just knowing like where we stand and what you have been doing, I find that would be helpful.
No, and that's great feedback, and I appreciate that. I think what would probably be best for me to do, because I get busy, I have a family, this is volunteer for me as well, is to set a time. So actually Craig does the same thing on like Sundays or Saturdays. He sends out an update to the school committee and gives an update report. And I think having a routine schedule like that is important. So I think what I can commit to solve that and make sure that I'm doing it on a regular basis is from here on out, at least giving like a weekly update, even if it's just a touch base. Hey, not much went on this week. But on Sundays doing that, and that's an easy ask. And I think just to make sure that everybody continues to stay in the loop, it is going to be vitally important that you all stay in the loop more and more and more. And you're going to have to be, because if we do move forward with a bond effort, we're going to have an aggressive couple months here that we're going to have to work together. So I think that's a good feedback. Thanks, Christine. So I'll commit to Sunday newsletters. All right. I'll follow. And when I get mine from Craig, that'll give me the ticker that I need to put mine out. So that way I don't forget. And hopefully you were excited about that email. I was excited about sending it. So it's certainly something I like to do is reach out to the group. Anybody else? Questions about what's been going on to date? I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So essentially, I'll move on to the RIDE, but just the last point. So essentially, it's been leadership meetings, working with RIDE. I will tell you the RIDE feedback before we got the letter has been great. We met with RIDE on multiple occasions. I've been meeting with Harold Sands. Harold and I have met on at least 3 to 4 occasions talking about, how can we make this work from a financial picture, working with the town. So this conversation isn't just about schools. The conversation is how we make this work as a community. How can we make the bond a boost to the entire community and figure out a better financial picture when we come out of this? It's tough to imagine because a lot of people just see dollar signs. But you have to take these events, I'll call it, or these opportunities, which is a better word, and try to use it as a catalyst for the whole community. So we've talked about that as just being a building effort, like, wow, it's great to have a new building. But I think we all want it to be more. And the discussions Harold and I are having is, how can we leverage some of this funding to leverage housing aid on the town side? So can we make it so that when we get the housing aid reimbursements, it helps the town side, that maybe they can put money in the capital? And maybe, by leveraging some of this bond effort. And there's ways to do that. Some of that gets a little complicated because of the way housing aid works and the reimbursements. But if you creative think like that, and Harold's been very good at that, and I appreciate that. Harold, is there anything you want to say on that? I don't know if I can explain it any better at this point.
No, I think that's the perfect height, the 20,000 foot height, because we'll get into that tomorrow, and I want to get the feedback from the town before we go any further.
Okay. Man, a few words. All right. So I think that's it for my chairman's report. Does anybody else have any questions before I move on? Perfect. I'll move on. So the approval, and this goes, Rob, this goes right to your topic. So the RIDE SBA approval document. Rich, Rick, I'm gonna ask you to explain a little bit, because to be honest with you, I don't fully understand how we got that extra 5%. I believe it's because we're looking at consolidation. But it surprised me a bit when I got the letter, and I haven't had a chance to catch up with Mario. I sent him an email and he hasn't called me back yet.
Well, Phil's on, Luke, so I will
Phil.
hand it to Phil.
I
So
didn't see Phil come in, so Phil,
So I don't know either, by the way. They did not ask us any questions regarding that. They asked us other questions that we responded to. Certainly, we laid out our path for incentives. They found an additional incentive. You should reach out to Mario and ask him. But as Luke mentioned, and I could tell you, through our work with other municipalities, RIDE's SBA's disposition towards Coventry, I have not seen before. And you need to be mindful of that and somehow turn that into a very positive thing for your community. They obviously see a need in Coventry. They are excited about what you have proposed. They want you to be successful. So they have basically cleared the runway for you. They have removed any obstacle that they could put up. And trust me, they can put up some obstacles, but they have not. So Luke, I would encourage you to reach out to Mario. You or Craig would be the most appropriate person to ask. Wouldn't be me. And then you could report out.
so I'll certainly reach out tomorrow, and I'll be sure, Craig, to CC you on it. And just, I did ask, I'll ask again, but maybe they don't want to answer. From what I was reading and what I got the gist from was that they do provide a bonus, because which ones didn't we, let me ask this, Bill. What didn't we tap into? I know that originally we weren't looking at the consolidation bonus. Do you know what other, Harold, go ahead.
Okay, from the report that I got from RIDE, there was 4 that we tapped into: health and safety, life safety, building envelope, and educational. Those were the 4 that make up the 20.
Okay, well, that explains it. So which one out of those didn't we get? Because I know health, safety, and life
Well,
safety.
I also believe you got the capacity one.
Right.
So I think that was one of the 4. But what you did not get would have been consolidation.
Okay.
All right, we talk about consolidation, and in fact, that's one of the things that I don't want you all to forget. the plan for Coventry cannot stop at the middle school. You have a much greater need still. And what you have done wisely is to position yourself to be successful to continue this plan for the next 20 years. And that next 20-year plan will likely include consolidation of some small elementary schools onto a campus where you have your nice new middle school. All of this makes such logical sense when you think about it. So that one you did not get. Newer and fewer, right? We didn't knock any buildings down to create one. And maybe that's the same, newer and fewer, same as consolidation. So that's the one I think you did not get.
I'm okay with giving that one up because I think we were able to salvage enough of the middle school to really make it worth it. And instead of just knocking buildings down, I think we're smart in our approach of keeping the core facilities and building off of that. So.
Well, because, by the
20%
way,
anyway.
that gives you the, because you have kept that middle school, which was originally a high school, you have square footage and building areas that Barrington Middle School did not get, right? Because they built new. And a new middle school would not have afforded you the auditorium, the extra PE spaces that you have. I mean, you've hit the jackpot in terms of that middle school project because you are being able to carry forward what was once a high school without any reduction in aid either.
And to
Where's
add to that,
cautious when-
Phil,
Go ahead, John.
Phil, it also gives us, because we're maintaining part of the building, it gives us a place to put kids when we're transitioning through the construction project from one element to another. If we were doing a total knockdown, we'd have no choice but to use modular classrooms or some other option that, would be a little bit more negatively impacting students.
No, you're right. I forgot all about that. And I'm not sure the whole committee knows this, but Joe and Alita did a lot of work in helping us find the spaces that we would need at the school to keep everybody there, do the construction safely and as efficiently as possible. So I look forward to tomorrow's meeting.
I mentioned everybody except Alita. She has her video off, but she was instrumental in that swing space. She actually took the plan and marked it up. And having her construction experience was vital because she was able to look at it from a contractor standpoint. And she was like, oh, we'll just take this room and split it into 4 and we'll just do this and build partition walls. And which is extremely helpful to have another perspective because, you get boxed in, right? You're not thinking of the fact that you have all this space. And if you just take some electives and you throw them on a cart, you can use that space. So, Craig?
Yeah, I just want to say that back to Mrs. Shockley's comment, my conversations with Dr. De Silva at the School Building Authority, he's consistently talked about the quality, the makeup of our school building committee, and historically some of the his experience and knowledge is that Coventry has left a lot of money on the table, but I think we had a meeting with him. He said that, really wanting to support us as much as possible because of the effort, the work, again, of this committee. And so I just wanted to reiterate what Ms. Shockley said. I think that's a big part of it. We can't underestimate that. And we're hearing that throughout this conversation, the input that's, committee members have made. And so, I think and you started off with Mr. Murray about the makeup of the committee and the work that they've done in valuing the work. And I think the School Building Authority sees that. I truly think they're genuine in wanting to support us and remove any barriers that they can. And I think they've stated that several times. And I think the 62.8% reimbursement rate is a verification of that.
No, I agree. And I think as we try to put this before the voters, the knowledge of who's making up this committee, I think would be important information to get to them. where people work, what they do, and the fact that they all came together, volunteered their time, and came to a consensus of what we should do for our school buildings. It speaks very highly for our community, who we have here as residents who were willing to step up. So thank you all.
Actually, I'm writing that down because I think it's a good communications thing too, is highlighting the members of the committee. I think it's the strongest part of this process has been, we have such a great committee and a diverse backgrounds that have been extremely valuable through this process. The other thing too, just to note, that came on the letter is that we're getting $8 million is in what they call PAYGO. That is upfront. If I remember correctly, it's 15% of our 42.8%. And there's actually a really handy calculator on the RIDE website that allows you to calculate all that. But we didn't have to do that because it was in the letter. But that 8 million upfront allows us to essentially, we could submit invoices directly to RIDE and then we'll pay them. That is one option for that work, and it takes it off the top. So that is a substantial amount in itself, and just so happens it covers a majority of the work that we'll be doing in phase one. So for the first year, really, we're not having to tap into the full amount of that money. So again, we get into financial strategies of how do we work that to our advantage. There's multiple directions we could go with that. And again, that's something we have to work out with the town to say, you know, how do we want to factor that in if we're going to present this out. But it was pretty exciting to get the full ask. I will tell you that Phil will tell you it's atypical to get your full ask, but we did. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, we got 6 months, right, to make a decision. So unfortunately, we don't even have 6 months. We have a little over a month to make a decision, because if we're going to go to bond, we've got to make that decision. So they don't give you a lot of time. When the money comes, it comes fast, and you either take advantage or you don't. So. Rob, did your question get answered?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Do you have any other questions? Feel free
No.
to,
No.
does anybody have any questions?
No. I guess the only other question was, is there a timeline as when the decision needs to be made by the town council to go forward? Because, I mean, this has to get out in the open.
Yeah, so I have talked to Tom Norray, and I've also talked to George Nardone. Both are supportive of the effort, our state reps. And I'm actually sure I could get every rep and senator on for the legislation. That's not a problem. It's a matter of drafting it and getting it through the legislature, which it's not hard to get through, but you got to draft it and get it done. And when they get in the budget cycle, it gets difficult. So the short answer is by the end of June, really it needs to happen, because they typically adjourn. We don't have a full-time legislature. They come back at January 1. So if you do that 6-month allowable from RIDE, we won't make another session, which is unfortunate, but you know, that's how it goes. So we deal with what we have in front of us. Anybody else? Kim.
Thank you.
Does everything have to go in a certain order? Can we draft and put in front of the legislature before we put it? I'm guessing.
It's a good question. I don't think we have to go in order. We can certainly draft it. I actually don't believe, I think this question was asked before, and we don't necessarily, we can draft it, but in order to have the legislature pass it, I believe they need something from council, a resolution from council, I believe, but I can check on that.
All right.
We can certainly talk to our state delegation. I can make a call to Tom to have him check with the legislative legal team. But Tom's been supportive. As you know, he has kids in school, was on the PTA for Black Rock, has been a great school supporter, and he's not the only one. Like I said, everyone that I've talked to from our legislative delegation has been very supportive, and I think sees the value. I would say maybe -1. And anybody else? No? Okay. So with that, I will move on to a discussion of South Kingstown. I assigned you all some homework. Hopefully you had a chance to at least look at one of the articles. And the reason I brought this up is because actually it was Mike Holmes, who just happens to be, I believe he's with the Carpenters Trades Union. He's typically on our meetings, just viewing and attendance. He does so because they're a union and they want to look at prospective work coming up. He happens to be on my planning board for Warwick. Him and I had a discussion a few months back, and he said, well, if you want to take a look at a process that may be going a different route than you are, look at South Kingstown. And it just so happened that recently their bond vote went down in a big dumpster fire. It was overwhelmingly voted against and did not pass. They were proposing a middle school, moving a high school to what I believe it was a middle school. And they had an architect, Phil can chime in on this, but that got indicted. So that created a stir. Then they subsequently sent out a mailer to the children, to the students of the district, instead of the parents. They used the mailing list. And after that, the town manager about a week ago said he was going to step down. So it's been quite the fiasco. And this isn't to poke fun or identify where South Kingstown maybe ran up short, but I think there was some lessons learned that hopefully we can chat about and take away from, because I think if we, one path forward is we not only have to look at what other districts are doing right, so the Cranstons, the Newports, the East Providences, but also the ones that maybe didn't get it right. So I'll open it up to the floor for those who may have read and what your observations were of that process. Kim?
So how many people live in South Kingstown? Do you know?
So it's interesting. I thought it was a community of 16,000, but I was talking to, I work with Bruce Kaiser, who used to be the former town administrator there, and he indicated it was around 30, but about 5,000 from the University of Rhode Island. So.
Oh, okay.
Count that population.
So they probably didn't go vote on the budget or on the school bond, but so it went down in a blaze of glory, which is unfortunate, but it went down with like 7,000 people voting, right?
Good point.
So I would like to know, other than these mailers that should never be mentioned again, what did they do? How did people know to go vote? Do these people vote in their regular referendums? Because, if you're just going to look at a silver lining, people voted, people knew. So I don't know. I mean, as far as getting the word out, maybe we want to say, oh, okay, the way they got the word out only got it to the people who are more likely to vote no. Or because of those mailers for the children, took people who might have been on the fence and turned them. But maybe the mailers were good because everyone, like, send a mailer to an adult in a household, because at least it made it so everyone knew about the vote, So I do kind of wonder about what different processes they went through just to get the word out that this was happening. If it turns out it was the architect being on the news for being indicted, okay, never mind, I'll scratch that. But if it really was like, yeah, they put the word out, people knew, and unfortunately it was the wrong message. Touch points are still important to know.
So that's a good point. That's a glass half full of looking at that scenario.
I try.
Yeah.
Coventry Town Council, glass half full.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I guess it lets you know one thing, right? You tend to get voters out when they're pressing back, right? If no one's pacified, they typically don't come out. So, Lee, and then we'll go to Kathy.
Thank you, Luke. Okay, we have to look at the South Kingstown situation differently from Coventry. I read the articles that Luke got together. The muckraking was very easy for the reporter. This is not your committee, and the town manager was involved in the budget, the building committee, and he pushed it a certain direction. And the residents of the town, who were real residents of the town, said this is not what we want, and he did not listen to them. The residents presented the issue. There was no public input. And so the school superintendent got specific people together and and told them what we were going to do. And they all shook their head yes. And the school superintendent said, these are our public meetings on the approval of this building program. And so they walked into a vote where the residents were totally opposed to this happening. We have parallels here because their proposal was $95 million. And we're at what, 95, 89, whatever it is, almost the same. And we have to be sure that everybody in leadership position in Coventry is on the same page. I follow the town council meetings, and we have an incredible town council at this moment in time. Kim, you can smile. And I mean, it's really wonderful to see the dynamics happen in these meetings if you're not watching them. And so the town council has to have a presentation that really puts the whole thing together so they feel comfortable going forward with it. I know we have support in the town council, but we have to have the right presentation. They have to understand what that middle school building will do, and specifically what else is going on in the other elementary schools. All the schools need help. They need to see the full picture. The town manager also did not have the support of the town council, and they invited him to leave. And so he left. What they're going to do now, I don't know. But we need to move forward with the presentation. We need to have a solid base to go forward. And we have to get out to the public the significance of this. It's a marvelous design that Phil and his team have put together. It's a marvelous concept. And as I've said before, this is a major step forward for Coventry. But this is a major step forward that's in step with so many dynamic things that are happening on the town council side. And I want to recognize Ann Dixon for starting this whole thing. She's done incredible things, but all of the members of the town council are wonderful. And we're moving forward in the town, and it's essential that this building be presented properly, and we find the funding and we move forward with it so that the schools are lockstep with the town moving forward into the 22nd century. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Always good input, Lee. So what I heard was, a lot of it, what we already got over, right? We had a unanimous vote. We went through the baker's dozen of concepts, if everyone remembers. We had gone through multiple iterations of site designs, talking about where the money would go. So I think we're past the first hurdle. But what I'm hearing from you is we need to support the council and making sure they have a good presentation and something to vote on, right? Making sure we support them. So, and that's good. And that we keep our town manager, right, through this process. The good thing is our town manager actually doesn't sit on here. It was kind of interesting to me that the town manager actually did sit on there, which is, I guess, could be a plus, could be a minus. I guess if you stick your neck out, you're bound to get it cut off. So, Kathy?
Yes, I just wanted to comment after reading the articles. I didn't get the impression that the citizens of South Kingstown turned it down because of money. It was because of the plan. They didn't like the change. They couldn't even picture their high school not where it presently was. There was an insufficient motor vehicle sort of study that didn't look at when the college was in session, how the traffic would be impacted for people going to the high school at the middle school campus. And there was just way too much warring between the folks involved. So there wasn't a unified front. In fact, there was actually a blog against the whole initiative. And again, I don't think it was because it was too much money. I didn't read that anywhere, I don't think. It was really about the fact of how the money was going to be spent and how the citizens felt shut out by the process. So I know that we have done the groundwork to make sure other people are at the table, but that has to be definitely brought to the attention of the citizens of Coventry, that this has been a process where we did get input from a variety of people. Again, it's the change that people don't like. I think if we were actually at this phase closing a couple of elementaries to build a big elementary, we probably would have way more resistance. So I really think in South Kingstown, a lot of it was that resistance of moving the high school. And then that just, and then there were characters involved, including the town manager, who I think he was a bit of a bully, I guess, apparently in some of the meetings, and turned people off. So, it was just the perfect storm for them. But I kind of think if the process had been done differently, and there had been a unified front, I don't think the citizens would have turned it down because of the money, because they know that renovations have to be done to the middle school or in some way, shape, or form. They know their schools are crumbling, just like we know that as well. So that was just my take on it all. Thank you.
It's a good point, Kathy. And I think, it's interesting you mentioned the money, because I noticed the same thing. Is like, there was very little discussion about the money. It was mostly about the change. And for those who weren't here early on, including Harold, and I believe Kim, you didn't have the benefit of being early on in the building committee, but we had those discussions. And one of the things that we brought up was the fact that consolidating, like one option is we knew the elementary schools need work, right? So there's two issues with that we talked about. One is, once you touch one, you really have to touch all of them equally because of equity, right? The second thing is, we know that depending on how enrollment goes in the future, if the trends continue, we may want to look at consolidation. If we looked at it now, it may gum up the works. Like, the truth is that change is hard, right? So the Machiavellian sort of theory, it's very difficult to move the ball when people are infighting because they, are attached to this neighborhood school. And we saw that in Warwick, where Warwick went through a huge dynamic shift under Phil Thornton about this, when they had to shrink due to enrollment, and there was an upheaval. They eventually did it, but it wasn't painless, and it certainly didn't involve the stage 1 and stage 2 process at the same time. So it's a good point. Kim?
Yeah, just highlighting off of what Kathy had said. I think another part of our communications plan is going to have to be reminding people of all the things we invited them to, reminding them of the email that went out from principals to say, if anyone feels they have expertise in this, please reach out. And then go into who actually did reach out and all the different iterations you went through. You don't have to go into detail on every other idea that might have come up, but just make clear, how many ideas were put on the table and rejected in order to get to this plan. And I think it was Phil who said earlier, we have a go forward plan. Like, this is a humongous investment in our town, but we're not just making it right now, we're making it so that in the future, if we need to grow or adjust, we have the space and the ideas already in place for what we might choose to do with other schools. I don't know how deep. I would ask a communications expert where to go there, but some of the communications at the beginning, if people weren't engaged, was kind of a tree that fell in the woods. So let's just remind them. We invited parents to go to these different places and put in their ideas and showed them concepts and asked them what they liked the most and what they really wanted as far as their children's education. I think it's important to remind people of that, because as I read the articles about South Kingstown, I wondered, did they not ask your input or did you not offer it? Because there's a difference. And I really don't know the answer to that, but I know in Coventry we did ask. So I would like to make sure that our residents recall, we wanted you to come, we invited, don't go too deep into how many went, but just say, we invited the town in to tell us what they wanted. Then we invited the experts in the town in to help us create that vision. And this is what we have, and we can't wait to move forward. That's,
That's a good point, and actually it leads me to a question I was gonna ask of either Craig or Phil. It might be best for the administration, if Patty could pull up. Because I don't have all of the agendas, but all of the meetings, and we can list those out, what dates they were. And because I think it's very impactful, even just to see the amount of meetings we've had to date. And the good thing is, I mean, some of those were pre-COVID, a large majority of those were pre-COVID. But because of COVID, we have many of those taped. And not only that, we had the full tour that we did of the middle school, Hopkins Hill, and the high school, because we had to Zoom it because of the executive order. I think it was what, 3 hours, 4 hours of video on that we took a cell phone through the schools. So I think being able to retrieve, and so this is another ask of Jim Murphy, is if we can retrieve all of that video and put it in one place, at least as a placeholder in preparation for our communications effort. Because I think it would be very impactful to have a page on our website that says, here's all the meetings. And by the way, here's all the video meetings. If you want to go back and look at the decision tree, and then maybe we lay it out as a decision tree. But I think to your point, Kim, it's important that people understand, once again, this didn't just come out of thin air, because for many people, it'll be the first time they hear of it. You know, we'll come into the summer, they'll be like, what, there's been a building effort going on? And so we need to educate them very quickly. Yes, and guess what? A lot of process has happened. You missed this train, so you better catch up. John has been waiting very patiently. John?
Thank you, Luke. After listening to Lee, I wanted to add on to what he had said, and then between Kathy and Kimberly, all my points were taken up. So I'd just like to reiterate a few of their points, which was we need to really get a good presentation to the town council, make sure everyone's on board from a leadership standpoint. I think we need to make sure that we're getting and incorporating all of the public comments that we get in. And I think that we need to get the word out there that this is happening.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right, who we have? Don, you're up.
Just a few things. Full disclosure, I did not read all the articles, but I did cherry pick a few that I read. And a few things I found interesting. One was, I think it was a blog post of somebody who opposed the project, mentioned that of the 3 votes, the building committee vote, the school committee vote, and the town council vote, none of the 3 votes were unanimous. So they didn't even have full support coming out of any of the committees to move this project forward, which I think, speaks volumes about their process, but also speaks volumes about having the support at the top. And it's hard to gather people around and get them to support something when you don't have support with the people who are closest to the project. So I thought that was interesting. They did, agreeing with Kathy, they didn't talk about funding or finances a lot, but one point was made that the project had changed scope so many times that the project quickly ballooned out of control, and they spent a lot of money before they even were putting shovels in the ground. It started at like 300,000, and by the time the vote hit the voters, it was like 1.4 million had already been spent, and they were just now settling on a project that nobody was supporting fully. And then the last thing is, Google is what Google is, but I did do a quick search in terms of demographic, and our parent demographic, meaning people between 25 and 55, is much larger than South Kingstown's demographic between 25 and 55. Ours is about 40% of our population. Theirs is about 27. So we have significantly more people who are of the age of having kids in the school department than they are. Their senior citizen demographic is a little bit bigger than ours. People who are well past having students in schools, but also their largest demographic, to Luke's point, was students 18 to 24, and that's probably because of the local university taking a big chunk of that. And then the last thing I was going to say is I'm kind of familiar with the area because I lived down there for a little while, and they have not been stagnant. I mean, the Curtis Corner Middle School, where they wanted to extend and build off that high school, is a relatively new school. That school is late 90s, early 2000s. It's not an old school. If you go to Curtis Corner, it's very well done. And they've had a lot of investment in their buildings over time, and a very sharp decrease in population in the student body and in the community. So I think there might have been some people who are on tight budgets or tight purse strings who may have felt like, we've spent enough at this point, and we're not going to support something that changes the character of our town by moving the high school out of the center of town, and that's throwing good money after bad, because we've already spent a lot of money and we don't see the results that we'd like to see. So those are just a few things I captured of that.
Thanks, Don. I mean, I think just the fact you brought up a great point, demographics, just that point alone of thinking about the makeup of communities. And most people would associate South Kingstown as a pretty affluent community. Very well managed. Steve Alfred was a town manager there for 40 years, which is unheard of, and was very, very well managed. Only left, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or thereabouts. But it's just well known as having good facilities. And I remember that school being built because I was at URI at that time in the late 90s. So you're right. And so that kind of tells you where we're at when we're looking at our facilities, which are 60s. Actually, sorry, Mrs. A, late 40s, right? Pre-50. So they've invested over time. We really haven't done any substantial. Anybody else? Ann. You're on mute, Ann. Sorry. Bound to happen, release once.
I did not have an opportunity to read the articles. I have two very dear friends who live in South Kingstown, and what I heard was this was a stupid idea. And one of them specifically said, why would they want to tear down a school, build a school in a park, which is used by people and is a very popular place? And so they were concerned about tearing down and rebuilding in an area where it was perceived that you were destroying something that was near and dear to people's heart. Now, based on what we're doing with this proposal, I'm finding that I am lacking messaging and I need to have help from the group. I think that maybe it's important to list all the meetings we've had and all of the opportunities we have had for parent input. And I believe I went to 5 of the 7 open houses that were held when I was on the school committee. So I got a chance to see what kind of parent input and staff input there was on each of those evenings. But I do believe that what people want to know is what will be done with the money. In other words, how will someone be accountable or someone's be accountable for this money that is going to go into my approval of a bond? And so when I try to explain what we're doing, I'm really at a loss for words. And I'm able to say, well, we're going to do some painting in all the schools. I have no concept of what that means. We also said we maybe do some electrical work or plumbing work. We're going to do infrastructure work in each of these schools. And we all know how important that is. But it's very difficult concept to explain to people that their money is going to be used for infrastructure. So we have to be able to get a story around that. Then I say, well, in the high school, we're going to be renovating the science laboratories. And so I'm asked, well, what are you going to do about career tech? I heard that you're losing students from the career technical group. And I said, well, right now we're focusing on the science laboratories that really are the 60s. And I told them that I had a tour and I saw them. They look just like they looked when I was in high school. So I'm having and then I explained the middle school. And I try to explain, we're going to have a 3-story addition. And they say, well, why are you going up high? That seems kind of crazy. Why don't you go out? And I said, well, the concept is that this area is big enough for a campus and that eventually we may be able to consolidate the elementary school, something like we just mentioned a little bit earlier in the meeting. So we need more information. We need to have a consistent messaging. And how do you explain what is happening in each of the elementary schools when basically it may appear to people to be cosmetic and or infrastructure, And how do we explain a 3-story building and not a flat building? And how do we explain what we're doing in the high school and how we feel that this is going to add value for the students and the staff there? So I'm just relaying the kinds of questions that I am getting and my frustration with myself as not being able to really clearly articulate what we're going to be able to do and how we are going to be able to express the value in what we're doing and the value for the citizens who are going to be paying for a bond, even though it's very attractive, but they're going to be paying in one way or the other. So those are the questions that I pose to the entire group. What is the messaging about some of those areas?
So you have a lot of points there, but they're all valid and good. And obviously from your perspective as a council member is important because you're going to get these types of questions. So I think I'm building up here to something that I think, you know, we essentially as a group need to provide the ammunition, right? We've talked about all of our plans. We know as a group they make sense. We know why, because we were part of the decision tree that came to those conclusions. I think we all can probably answer a lot of the questions that Ian just noted. You know, why are we going 3 stories? Well, because we had the discussion. We looked at first story and we looked at the efficiency of the building and mechanicals. And now you can stack things and make that building more efficient. In fact, we can put grades on each level and organize the grades and how the efficiency of that building works, right? We talked about that. Much more difficult to put into a 1-page flyer and say this was a good decision. So, but I think we need to do that and we need to do it quickly. Some of the things that I come across my mind right now is, you know, maybe we have icons and we have just like what the work is and then like smart, efficient, like what category does it fit into, right? So things like consolidation, some key tag words in town. Even if you're not pro school, many people, those same people are pro consolidation and pro forward looking because they know that it's like consolidating the fire departments. How many times do we hear that? Why don't you consolidate, or why don't you put the fire departments under the town? We pay one tax. Well, nobody's done it yet. But when you hear that, most hawks would say, well, that's a smart idea, you know, consolidation, efficiency of operations. And I think for those people, when you talk in that language, it makes sense, regardless of the fact that you have kids in school or not. The parent who has a young child is more thinking about, I'm going to use that building. My child's going to use that building. Obviously, I want to support this. So I guess I'll leave it at this because I don't want to take up too much time here, and we need to supply with ammunition and we need to figure that out very quickly, right? And we need to figure it out in a messaging format that gets that across in a very simple, easy to read manner, right? Why was this decision? Why is this a smart decision? I think we should always ask ourselves that, like, why was this a logical and smart decision? It wasn't an emotional decision, it was analyzed. Everything we've done through this process has been thought about and analyzed. And I think that's more than anything what people want to know. You said it in your first paragraph. South Kingston was a stupid idea. Why? Because it doesn't sound very analytical to take a school that was built 20 years ago and abandon it with no plan to reuse it, and then move it to a park and then start the process that way. I think our process was totally different because we went through the analytics first. The question is how we convey that very quickly to the populace and have them trust us. I don't know yet, but we're going to have to figure that out very quickly. Amy.
So 2 other things I think have to be on that like sheet of our talking points. One is that, 89 million seems like a huge amount of money to all of us. We can't even comprehend that. I think that the reimbursement rate has to be like almost like a celebration and compared to other communities that have gone after money, and say, look at what Coventry is going to get. So people see it as not just 89 million, but actually what we actually are going to be paying. And then the second piece of this is I think I've said this before, though, I think that people have to know the impact on them specifically. So if this were to go through, this bond, because that is the bottom line sometimes to some people. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want to improve our schools. They're in disrepair, they need work. But it's, how am I going to be able to afford this? And I think that has to be something that we constantly are putting out there to the community about what the impact is on them.
Good point. And I don't think, I'm cautiously optimistic. So that's why I'm ecstatic about the reimbursement rate, but of course I have to temper that against the fact that, the glass half empty, I think in all of us, right? And throughout the community will be, well, yeah, but I still have to pay some. I can tell people, it's like the winning the lottery. Oh, now I got to pay the taxes, right? So there's always going to be that pushback, and we have to be cognizant of, promoting one side, and then how do we?
Money's not going to be there again like this.
It's true.
It just isn't going to be there again. And so we have to compare it to other communities and what it's going to look like 10 years, 15 years down the line if we don't do it now. It's going to come back. Eventually, we're going to have to do this. There isn't going to be a choice. We're going to be at a point where we're in such disrepair that we're going to have to take it on. And then it's going to be a harder decision about what do we fix first? Because everything is going to need it at that point. Right now we're taking off a big chunk. So I get it, but the reason why people go to a sale, right, is because they're getting a discounted rate. I'm hoping that they're going to think of that the same way. We're going to be able to fix our schools for much less money because of the work that you have done and Studio Jade has done and this building committee has done in terms of planning it. And it's a great plan. So I think we have to celebrate that with the community because it compared to other districts, I bet you we are one of the better reimbursement rates. I know that some of the cities get more, but we've got to be up there. Compare us to a Cumberland or somebody that else is similar to us, a town that's similar to us. So.
Yeah, I think South Kingstown was going to get what, 50%. So that, and the outlying communities you're right, urban gets a lot, like Central Falls is like 95%, but their tax capacity is extremely low. They struggle for the 5. So, there's a relative capacity here. Craig, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, yes, just quickly, I had shared something with Mr. Murray. I think it was yesterday. I was just through Twitter. There was something that the city of Tulsa had put out about a bond, but just kind of a spin. What they said is they did this nice graphic one-page flyer, but it talked about what the community, what the students will get for the bond, and they hit a whole bunch of areas. And I think, we often talk about, we're not doing this or we're not going to do that, but I think, a strategy is to, as part of this communication plan is to just really concisely tell the community what they will get, whether, so this talked about like health and safety. One of the things in Tulsa they were doing is all their water systems and, it may not sound like much, but they were talking about the health and safety. Obviously they've had some issues in that, there would be brand new cafeterias, for students to be in. But I just think that's an important piece for us to identify and hit that list so that we hit the community with, this is what you will get for this money, and not just focus on the things that we're not touching.
Good point. Christine?
I think just to build off that too, one of my biggest takeaways, right, it sounds like everybody else too, right, where it says not the right fit for the town. I think we need to go beyond just what we're offering during the school day and what we're bringing as a community as far as, the auditoriums and the gymnasiums. And, we talked about the site work in the fields and just how much further we can reach just then during school hours. Because it's not just about the school day and what we've gone through and planned. It's really just about what we're doing for the community here. And I think that's important.
That's a good point. We've talked about that, and I think we've done a good job of keeping those common spaces and upgrading them for the benefit of the wider community. Anybody else? So I want to say thank you to the group. I am going to open it up, so we don't open up every item for public comment, but I have a couple members and I do have a couple members on the attendee list here. So I'll open it up for any public comment, if anybody wants to raise their hand and chime in on this issue about the bond in South Kingstown and thoughts on how we can succeed. I'll open up a public comment. No takers. All right. I'll sum it up as this. So this was all leading to an ask. All right. You saw what South Kingstown did. You've all mentioned it. We need a presentation. We need a presentation rather quickly, right? So here's my ask. Each one of you create a slide. I don't care what format it's in. I don't care if it's Word, I don't care if it's PowerPoint, I don't care what the document format. Handwrite it on a note, take a picture of it, send it to me. What does your slide say? What is the one point, if you had to pick one point that you want to get across, or you want to clarify, whether your perspective is a community member, administration official, whatever, and send it to me in the next 2 days. That is my ask. Because it will have to fall on somebody. It's likely I'm going to be a part of this to create this presentation. I will loop some of you in on this who are interested in helping create that presentation. But we will need to get one. A big piece of this is tomorrow's meeting and a couple meetings that we're going to have with the town on financial strategy and how we present this. But it also goes to Ann's point, which Ann's slides might say more to the effect of what the impact and value is to the community. I've heard about demographics. That may be a slide or multiple slides, right? But thinking about how this would get presented to the community in easily digestible bites, and thinking through not only you as a committee member, but put yourself back as a parent, as just a regular community member, what you would like to see. The core thread I've ever seen in any decision tree process is successful votes go to people who have trust in the elected leaders and to the people who have formulated the plan. So many of the people in our community don't know us, many do, but we mentioned earlier, they need to get to know us. And I think that's part of it too. They need to know that we've done the job that they haven't or haven't been able to be a part of. So I'll leave it at that. That is my ask. Hopefully you will all do it. That includes everybody with their video off, except for you, Phil. Hopefully you're hearing me, and I'll send an update on an email on that. Great work on doing some research for those who read it. Even Don, who didn't do his homework fully, we'll forgive you.
I did some of it. I read some of them. I got a C- on that one. That was not an F.
You brought up demographics. It's you're like right there, right?
Luke,
I'll move.
this is
What's that,
Phil.
Phil?
I just want to let you know that we're committed to stand by you all the way to the end. So certainly whatever resources I can bring, I will. So don't worry about that.
You're going to regret saying that, Phil. I know it. I'm going to make you regret saying that.
It's all right. This is the fun part now.
Yeah. So, and along those lines, I think, in thinking, I know we're going to hit on this communication, and we've talked about communication, but in the short term, we do have Phil, and Phil has done communication and some marketing for other communities. So we do have him to lean on some of the presentation and graphic work that I think is going to be so essential. And I can't think of a better team to help us with that, knowing how much knowledge they have from the beginning. I think one of the things we've had is continuity, which I think, just bouncing off the last topic, is one of the things I noticed is they had a new school committee come in. They had multiple leaders that kind of changed gears in the middle of the process. We haven't had that consistency and thought process. So that's been great. All right, project schedule. Alita, are you on? I just want to make sure, because she's a big part of the scheduling.
Yeah, no, I'm on. Sorry,
Yeah.
I've been dealing with children who like cameras.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure you're on this topic. So project schedule is, as you all know, Alita has been a great help on laying out schedules, and we had a preliminary schedule going into this process. But obviously we had some gaps in time, so we are looking to update that schedule. We know that we have to, by the end of June, be moving forward with the decision. So we also have some hit points along the way and looking at schedule. So you all have predictability on meeting schedules for your own lives, because coming up, I'd like to start laying that out now. I think it was very effective during a stage 2 formulation that we had a very clear schedule. And for the most part, we stuck to that with a few minor exceptions when we couldn't make it work. So Alita, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you willing to continue to assist on formulating that?
Yeah, and I'll say this, Luke, and guys, I'm sorry, I'm nothing if not direct at times, but I feel like when I presented and when we sat and we did the schedule, probably in early February, it was such a tight window of all of the things that we needed to do, with the understanding that the elementary schools and high school need to be summer slammer type as far as a cost driver, so that we can get in next summer, and that we needed to be in the ground at the middle school by the end of next year to hit the reimbursement. So none of those things have changed, yet we haven't made the type of progress that we wanted to on the behind the scenes. So I mean, the good thing is we weren't going to be doing anything until the vote passed yes anyway. So we haven't lost that time, but now I just, we probably have a bit of a scramble to get through like an OPM selection, get this communications kicking and going. And I think, Luke kind of alluded to it, and I know we have a committee and we've been, in and out. We've been trying not to bog everybody down with it, but I think it's going to change where we start asking for a little bit more help. And if that's, where you need direction, clear, please do this versus, start doing it like teachers in school. We can start pointing to people and asking them directly if they want to help instead of asking for volunteers. But we're probably going to have to pick up a few things, pick up the pace between now and call it October, maybe, when we'd be at a vote. So I'm going to take the schedule that I presented previously. I think we'd had them at monthly meetings and things like that, and trying to slow it down. And I think we'll ramp it back up. I'm going to hold on.
Okay. So
hold on, I'm on the phone. We're going to get something published and sent around for our next meeting 2 weeks from now, prior for review. It's going to have some detail to it, and we're going to try to hit it hard and finish strong.
Well, I'm going to correct that, because I'm going to try to shoot for 1 week from now, if we can do it.
The schedule will be out.
Because we need to get updates. There's going to be a lot going on in the next few days. And so here's my ask. We have multiple construction people on here. I'm going to put you on the spot. Christine, Rob, and John. John, I believe you're in bridge engineering, correct? DOT. And we got Rob, who's in the construction industry, and Christine is in the construction industry. Could you four come up with a schedule? Leave me out of it. Is that an unreasonable ask? If you have a conflict, let me know. But could you four get together offline and do that schedule? That's my ask.
Yeah,
Don't
that's,
all jump at once.
Alita, you want to send out like a meeting request or something so that we can all touch base?
Yep. And I'll send it out with the old one, the last one that we talked about as a group. I'll send that out attached, and we can try to come prepared. I'll shoot some emails to you guys. That's a yes, Luke, for us. Well, I don't know, General.
So I'm gonna let you
Yes.
manage it. I don't need to be, just when you get the schedule sort of, in a better place, certainly keep me on the email chain. I'll take a look at it, but I think it's better. I have more of a hands-off approach on this. I'm gonna be working other angles and other priorities, so I'll count on you guys to get that done. So perfect. We'll have a schedule. So my hope is by next meeting, we at least have a draft, Alita. Is that reasonable? Okay. You're like, yeah, I can do I do schedules in my sleep. Awesome. All right. Update on the OPM RFP. So I say we, Alita drafted an initial one. I took a look at it, added some things. It went to Phil, and it's been bounced back, but we need to refine it. So here's my ask. Harold, who is doing procurement now for the schools? I know that Sarah was doing the procurement. process.
I'm taking up that mantle.
Okay, so I need somebody from the administration, and it may include others, Craig, I don't know, but to work with, to whittle this down and get it out.
Yeah, I'll work with Harold and we'll also, include, get John Anderson to give some feedback. He's done this also, so.
Okay, so we'll be talking, Harold, we'll talk maybe a little bit tomorrow, because we'll be meeting anyway. And we'll make sure that, Alita, did you do any additional work on it? Do I have the latest draft from Phil?
You have the latest. I didn't incorporate Phil's comments yet. Wanted us to speak first.
Okay.
You have the
So
latest.
do you want to continue to be looped in on this? I
Yeah,
don't want to
sure.
volunteer you for too many things, so.
Oh, yeah. No, don't worry. These are the only two I'm doing.
Okay.
Schedule and
Does
OPM.
anybody feel a desire to get into the OPM procurement? I just put that out there in case anybody's just dying to get on board this train. All right. So
Want to
we'll,
Fair too, or clear. I may have to ask somebody to jump in and ride shotgun on the OPM procurement, because any type of procurement at some point I start feeling conflicted because of, what I do and all. So we can find somebody else at the torch, but as far as putting a draft and getting something out on the streets, that's simple.
well, we will be looking for a selection team as well, because we have a rating system in there. So I'm assuming, Harold and I will talk, but I'm assuming members of the administration may be in on that, but I'd like to have building committee members as well. So that can be a separate team that comes in and does that. That sound good? I think that's where you most, your conflicted status may come in on selection. But drafting, we're open on how we're drafting it. So, okay. All right, perfect. So we'll be talking about that. Anybody, before I move topics on the OPM, anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, gripes? No? Okay, perfect. Moving on to number 8, communications and outreach discussion. So one thing did anybody pick this up in any of the articles? Who is the marketing communication person for South Kingstown? Horn Communications. Does that name sound familiar? So I'm not placing blame on him or the group, but we interviewed Chris Horn and Horn Communications earlier this year. So they were one of the, and I'm not saying that it was, any of that was applicable to Chris. I'm just saying that it was just interesting to see that we've seen a couple of these teams come through. We've talked about communications. I literally, I said this to Alita last night, we were on the phone. I have those papers on my wall that I need to translate in some semblance of a format. I have not been able to get to it. And to be quite honest, with everything going on, I can't, even say I will get to it at this point because it's languished. So does anybody out there want, if I send them the images, willing to translate the data into a sheet to at least get it in some semblance of organization format? So like an Excel or something like that. We had, just so for those who don't know, we had a communication brainstorming session pre-COVID. I think it was very close to when COVID happened. And it brainstormed ideas. Phil jotted those ideas down. We were thinking through the process. And I'm looking at my wall now. It's like who to target, how to target, what our audience would be. My thinking is that if we can at least translate this, we can use that as a basis when we meet next week to start bouncing off ideas on organizing that matrix in the communication strategy.
You can
So
send that to me. I'll organize it for you.
perfect. Mrs. A, thank you. So I will have that to you tomorrow. I'll take in the work, I'll scan them. I have an oversized scanner. I'll scan them in. And if you can translate that over, and then feel free to bounce it back to me. Maybe we can organize it a little bit and we'll make sure that task gets done for next week. So perfect. Mrs. A. All right. I didn't want to get too far into communications tonight because I know we had other things on the agenda. I know communications is a hot topic. We've talked about that slide. I think next week, what I like to do is, does everybody okay with meeting at the same bat time, same bat place? Does anybody have any conflicts next Tuesday? I don't see anybody. So I know you all love meetings. I'd hate to deprive you. So I'm definitely going to meet next Tuesday. That will be focused more on communications. So at that point, we'll have our slides, right? We'll have individual slides we'll review. We're also going to have a preliminary schedule. We're going to have an organized chart, right? We're also going to have a semblance of when the OPM is going to go out. And so with those tasks, we can review and we can focus a little bit more on organizing that matrix and get our mind shift into the communications. Last thing on communications, we did have a presentation at our last meeting with 11 communications. They haven't gone out. One thing I will say that we had brought to the, Jason brought to everyone's attention is because of the cost, it would need to go out to RFP. So the thought process is this, and if anybody disagrees, by all means, speak up, is after next week, I'm going to use this organization and strategy in your dialogue next week on communications to finalize an RFP to go out for communications. So what do we want to accomplish? And that will be what you come up with next week will feed into the RFP of what we're looking for specifically, because we can't afford everything. So if we're going to move forward with this, you got to be very targeted. How are we going to do it? Do we want to do a social media campaign or do we want to do a mailer campaign? Two very different costs, two very different strategies, two very, very different potentially demographics. That all makes sense? If anybody disagree with me, feel free to speak up.
Look, I have a quick question.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Rob.
So I don't have a problem with doing the communication strategy, but I asked a question about when we're going to present this to the town council.
Yep.
Ultimately, if they decide it's a no-go, we kind of, I guess we talked end of June. When would they make this decision? Like, and what was the number of the communications specialist that we brought in? Like, just rough. You don't have to give me an exact.
No, I'm gonna tell you straight out. I mean, we had about $27,000 outside the budget that was allocated to communications. The idea on the RFP was do a quals-based RFP. So set the number, tell them exactly what type of campaign we want, right? That we're gonna be, this is how we intend to get the information out. So they could come back with a quals-based RFP and say, what value can they bring to the table for that money? My thinking is that's a much better way to go about it because this isn't a low bidder process. It's very difficult to define for them what that process should be. I'd rather 2-3 companies say, hey, we've gone through this before and this is the way we think it should go for you based on your community, based on what you're telling us. Here's our feedback and here's what we can do in terms of time and strategy to make you successful. That makes sense? But you're right, we're running out of time. I would say that the latest probably council decision would be 3rd week of June and Ann, feel free to chime in on this, but Ann did send me 2 dates, 14th, 28th of the regular meetings. Whether they're willing to have a special meeting on this, I don't know, but it may be worthy of it considering it's such a big topic. So Ann, I don't know if you have anything to contribute to that.
I mean, I think the big thing in this town is everybody wants to know what it's going to cost them. What it's going to, so I think if you're going to do a presentation, maybe this is what it's going to cost over 5 years. From year 6 to 10, it's going to cost this. But on the same token, every year, the biggest problem that you hear citizens say, their tax is going to go up 3%, 3%, 3%. So is that going to happen on the town end? Are they going to, their budgets for the next 3, 4, 5 years, what's their projected budget? Is it going to be, I know no one can look into the crystal ball, but is it 3%? So now someone's going to say, I got to pay 3% for my town taxes, my taxes, and then the bond. So I think this is where I think we just have to create a graph, say, maybe when you do the presentation, this is what it's going to cost the average homeowner. And it's clarity. That's all it is.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And welcome to the world that I'm living in right now. So this is the discussion I'm having with other elected officials, with the town manager. I can't disagree. Like the way people think about it, I think about it as a taxpayer is that this is obviously going to translate to a tax increase. Regardless of the amount of money we're getting, there's going to have to be supplemental money put into the pot to be able to pay for this. The question is how that fits into the big picture. I can tell you this, Harold, and I said this in the beginning. The reason I want to meet with the town manager and the finance director is we've come up with a potential strategy to try to address what you just said. Is there a way that we can creatively come up with a strategy to give tax security or predictability over like the next 5 years? And essentially tell them by doing this bond, we can give them tax certainty over the next 5 years. And there's some other tangential benefits to this, to the town, to the schools, etc. So I can't disclose too much of that because it may not be a real plan if we can't get a go. But I can tell you that we are actively seeking an alternative way to present this. Because I know intuitively, and I believe all of you do too, they're going to say how much, and then the next question is going to be for how long, right? Because what I can't do as a building committee, what we can't do as a building committee, is give the taxpayer any certainty on what's the operations budget's going to be next year and what sort of tax hit they're going to take. So I would say that I'm trying from where we sit, I say we, Harold and I, and some other administration officials are working together to see if we can figure that out and help the town get over this hill, because it's all a shared responsibility to do that. I know that's very vague, but just know it's being worked on, Rob, and I hear you. And any sense of schedule on your side? I know you had mentioned the 14th and the 28th in your email.
I've made a recommendation. I do believe that we should have a special meeting just completely devoted to this topic. I don't think that having you be an agenda item within a regular meeting is going to be sufficient for the needs that the committee has and the needs of the public to know and the needs of the town council to make a decision. So I'm going to leave that up to your discussion tomorrow morning, but I have recommended a special meeting just for this particular topic.
Okay. And I think a big part of that is going to be a discussion I need to call, I'll probably call Tom tomorrow and figure out when we have to get our request in, and whether we can draft legislation in advance, at least to prep it in case you move forward. So that'll also drive how far we can take this, because it, obviously if they tell me there's a certain hit date for that, I have to back up off of that because I can't change their schedule. So. Make sense? Rob, does that answer your question? I think it does.
Yes, thank you.
Over answered, right? Okay. Anybody else? Communications at this point? No? I'm willing to run the meeting longer if you want. We can just chat. No, we're good. All right. So with that was the last agenda item. I think we're good. So we are going to schedule a next meeting for, I didn't have it on here to schedule the next meeting, but I don't necessarily need to do that. I'm thinking I'm aware of that. Craig, did you have something?
No, I just was gonna help you with the motion for the next meeting, but I will mute.
Okay. So I'll make I'm going to ask for a motion for the next meeting to be next Tuesday, and which is the 1st at 6 o'clock. Looking for a motion.
So moved. Next Tuesday, June
Thank you,
1st.
Lita.
Second.
I'll second.
Who's my second?
Ms. Shockley.
Okay, perfect. I'll do a raise hand vote on this, since we have so many people. All those in favor? I see
Aye.
hands. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Okay. Anybody opposed? Give me a voice. None opposed. Thank you. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn at 7:37 p.m.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you,
I'll
Mr.
second
Clerk.
it.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Again, I'll do a raise hand vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
See hands up. Anybody opposed? Give me a voice. All right, no voices. Thank you very much. It's great to see you all again. I'll keep you in the loop, and have a great night.
Hey, guys.
Luke,
Thank you.
good night, everyone.
Good night.